Now that you have your list of questions that you and your group have formulated, we are going to sort these questions. And we're going to sort them into closed questions and open questions. And let's begin with definitions. For our purposes, closed questions will be simply answered questions with a yes, a no, or a single word, or a brief statement. An internet search could help you find an effective answer to this quickly. An open question requires a little bit more explanation. There might even be multiple ways to answer this question satisfactorily that can't be found through a brief internet search. Okay? On your list, you'll label any question that you and your group determine to be an open question with the letter O. Any question that you and your group determine to be a closed question, you'll put the letter C next to it. You might discuss ways with students of how will you go about doing this sorting? Will one person read the question and the whole group has a conversation? That's a management issue that you'll have to work on. Right now, I'll give you about 5 minutes to pause this recording and sort your questions on your list with your group. Now, once you and your group have sorted the questions, the next thing that you want to take care of is asking some important questions about this process. So one process question that I have is, what are the advantages or disadvantages of a closed question? Right? Are there questions that are open-ended that have more advantage or that are used for a specific purpose? What are the disadvantages or advantages of open questions? This process often is difficult for students and adults, frankly. So you might additionally ask, which of these questions, if any, did you have trouble classifying as closed or open, and why? Another thing that I like to do at this point with students is to discuss the possibility of, were there certain question words, as we discussed in our language objectives, the who, what, where, when, how, that yielded closed questions more frequently or open questions? Was there a word that really helped to clue what type of question you were asking? The next step that you do after having discussed all of this is you go on to steps 3 and 4 over here, and you discuss the idea of changing one of your closed questions to an open question and changing one of your open questions to a closed question. How might students go about that? The bottom line for this conversation, once you have completed it and asked everyone from all the table groups to share an example from each numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 on this slide, is to then ask if there's a reason why one question is more useful than the other, or if they both have merit, which is usually how this works out. The next step in this process for using the QFT is to develop priority questions. And these priority questions can be geared particularly to an objective and your content. So, for example, if you're using guidelines to develop your priority questions, that, let's say in your project, you're encouraging students to develop an essential question to launch and guide academic research related to a piece of literature that the whole class has read, then in this instance, the priority questions will allow for further questioning, utilize varied resources, and involve issues, locations, and subject matter relevant to the piece of literature that everyone has read. So your students may need you to help select which of these aspects help them to determine priority. The next part you're going to have your students do, and you will do right now, is to ask, what method will you and your group use to ensure that everyone participates in selecting priority questions? How might your group determine this? You're going to pause the recording now and do this priority selection with your group right now. Take about 5 minutes to select the 3 questions on your list of questions that you have already determined to be, that you are determining to be your priority questions. One very interesting thing when I did this activity recently with adults was that one of the adults said, do not discount closed questions because we can always change it to an open question if we feel we need to later. So you might want to keep that in mind as you do this activity. Now, the next step that we're working on is perhaps the most important. This is the reflection process, right? As a follow-up to your priority questions, where you might ask, why did you choose this? How did you choose this? You're also going to reflect on the process of the QFT. So before we get to the process of the QFT, let's discuss the priority questions. If students have narrowed it down to 3 questions, a question you're going to request of them is, where in your list of numbers did these questions come from? Were they all at the top, numbers 1, 2, 3? Were they throughout the list? Because sometimes it takes a little while for you to get rolling with your question development. Another aspect of this reflection for the priority and this part of the process is that I have to request sometimes if there were questions that were difficult for them, and if they actually needed to find one particular question for a research project, I might further extend this QFT process even beyond these 3 priority questions and give students another set of time to select their highest priority question by circling that X and having that be the standout question, and then describe why. Another follow-up and differentiation activity extension for this could be, okay, now that you've selected your highest priority question, how might you improve that question even further given your research and academic needs? So this QFT can really go very far for you, and it can be flexible across all of your curriculum. Now, back to this reflection process. One of the things that students reflect on is the challenges of asking questions. What are some challenges that they faced in terms of working as a group? And you can add additional questions to this, but it's really important to reflect on the actual process of following the rules and sticking with the subject and the technique that we employ using the QFT. For our purposes in this module, I'm going to ask that you take your reflection and your thought process, your answers to either of these questions, and add them into the Google Classroom, into the comment section beneath this material. Feel free to reach out to me directly through the classroom or through email if you have further questions.